Welcome to another episode of Sexy Marriage Radio. And we're just going to jump right into this one, Pam, because this is a dynamic that happens a lot, which is we talk about the higher desire, lower desire, and the tension that happens because of that. And it's a natural thing inherent in a system, particularly a marriage, which is where we're going to land, that one person wants something more than another. And then specifically today, we're going to be talking about how when it plays out in our sex lives in marriage, how there will definitely be a higher desire, and then there's definitely a lower desire. And sometimes those can be really close together as far as there's not a huge discrepancy. But one of the fundamental rules is that the lower desire is the one that gets control of the frequency of sex, whether they like it or not. They're just the de facto gatekeeper. Okay. We've talked about that before.
Yeah, plenty of times.
And so now we're going to actually talk about, though, what happens when the person typically is the higher desire, but the lower desire is totally adept at doing this too, can take the stance of, well, this is just what the system is. And they're accurate with reading the dynamic, but the way they're presenting it and utilizing it in the dynamic is actually weaponizing it.
I got to think that's pretty common.
Absolutely it is, which is why I think we need to do a show on it, because let's just bring it about more above the surface so maybe we can be more aware of it. Because I've done this. I'll totally own. I think of in some instances, and this was all kind of a pseudo sophisticated way when I look back that I was doing this, and it wasn't good. It's not coming in from goodness, but when I was getting into the field and training and reading a bunch of things and then giving the books to you to read, and you were open to the reading idea. You're like, absolutely, usually, but then it became a stack of books on your nightstand, because I'm still, even though it's accurate in the dynamic between us, the way I was pursuing that with you was largely just pressuring you in a little more unhealthy way. It's not helpful way for sure, because it became a dynamic of I was right in theory, but I'm not playing it out well in practice.
Yeah. And that can, learn what I've learned. And then you'll by default become smarter and better and change your ways. Right?
And make it better for me. Mm-hmm. Right. And because it's all one-sided in the way we are making our moves, because we're making the moves for what I want.
And the quote unquote better, it would
exactly.
be your opinion of better.
Right.
Maybe your spouse is just fine the way they are.
Yeah. And so you can understand the system maybe even perfectly. I know a lot of the members of Sexy Marriage Radio, particularly those in the academy that have been around for a long time, because we do these monthly calls. And so when we start talking about some of the dynamics that they may bring up in these monthly calls, it's clear they understand the dynamic, but we still fall short. And I will do this too, of I'm not using that dynamic to expose me. I'm using it actually in an underhanded way to put more pressure and burden on you.
Yeah, I think that's just a really common, no matter what the topic is, sex, money, whatever, that's a really common way that we maneuver as human beings.
Absolutely. And so what we want to do is just think through this and how this is a structural reality of the dynamic. Right? This is just what happens within systems. This is where I use the phraseology of, this is each of us needing to realize we are having to live life on life's terms. We don't get to determine and change gravity. Mm-hmm. I have to live according to the term that gravity has and the dynamic it has on my life. No matter how much I want to fight it, it's a reality. And so that's what I fully believe when you talk about this higher desire, lower desire. It's a reality. Mm-hmm. And so we need to learn how to live within it. And so now actually, how do we get better at not just understanding the dynamic, but living better within it? And that's kind of where we want to try to go.
Perfect.
Because when we weaponize this, it's when I use it to corner you. This was a conversation that just happened. If members that are listening to this, if you're not somebody that's on the platform, that nation.smr.fm, there was a post just within the last 2 weeks that's just entitled Pressure. Mm-hmm. And it's in the general conversation discussion area. So everybody can see it. You can join for free. And it got quite a lot of traction in the comment section, because the man that was posting it was talking about this very thing, which is what made me start thinking through this as I was kind of reading through the comments and following everybody's thought process through it, that he's articulating well, here's the dynamic between you, wife, and I, because she's not one that I think is listening or on board with SMR, at least.
She's not a member of the Academy.
As far as I understand, I don't know for certain. And so what he's saying is accurate, but how he's using it isn't helpful. And that's kind of the idea that we want to just spend some time talking about. And to be clear, those of you that I would guess a majority of our audience are higher desire partners.
Yeah. Well, the lower desire partners not typically out listening for a podcast to.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's just how it is.
So we're going to speak to the higher desire partners directly throughout this episode. And so I want to get ahead of the thought, well, where you'll have this idea in our minds as a higher desire. Yeah, but you got to talk to the lower desire too, which is again, still weaponizing this thing, right? It's painting them as the main problem rather than, no, you are the main problem in your system. Not them. They're just someone you have to coordinate around and deal with and face, but you are the problem. Is our most powerful way to actually address anything that goes on in life.
Meaning I can only control me, right? I can't control what they do. I can't control. And if I'm just trying to manipulate them with taking whatever data I've got and pounding it into them, I'm just beating myself into a corner.
Right. Right. Because what we'll often do is I'll articulate something, and in essence, it's a very, very sophisticated way to blame them for the role they play, to add more burden to a dynamic. Because if when I think of our life in married life, in our sex life since as we've been married, as we've had these conversations, I fumbled all over that one.
Well articulated.
Yes,
there.
Thank you. That's very, very clean. IR smart. There's many conversations we've had over the decades we've been together about this dynamic, and many conversations we've had on the microphone about this dynamic, which is also still applicable to us as people, not just co-hosts of a show, that even when there's an understanding like we're trying to articulate today, there's still wait a second. What's my real motivation in how I'm portraying this? How am I actually utilizing it rather than just describing it?
So I guess what specific data are you referring to? How is it that examples of how it's used poorly?
So a lot of times these get brought up where we start to talk about a dynamic. We try to explain a dynamic because of some sort of frustration, built up hurt, discrepancy, disappointment, entitlement, something. And so it's like, rather than attacking you because you don't want what I want, I can take a stance that's kind of above it all and describe it. But the way I do so is really largely focused still just on you in that dynamic. Well, this is just the way it goes. Here's what I think of this. This is something you and I actually have had this conversation before. Not this pointed, but it came to my mind when I was putting this together, that I know I am at fault over the years of having times where I've described you as the lower desire, and there is an undercurrent, underhanded, well, you control it all. You are so you're responsible. You have to, that's even the subtle where I'm done initiating. I'm just going to wait for you, which is not utilizing the dynamic. It's weaponizing it. It's not me it's not being me being part of it. It's putting it all on you, which typically has a little bit more. We'll talk about some of the weight and what's really being communicated in that. But I could take the stance of, well, you're the one that wants it less than I, so it's up to you to have if we're going to have it or not. And it's accurate, but it's not helpful. Does that make sense? Okay.
So we're going to get to what's helpful when?
In the extended content.
Oh.
On what do you do about it as a higher desire partner? Okay. What's better ways to do this? This is just more about how do we bring it more to the surface to really have to realize what's my part in this? What am I doing? Because a lot of times what I would really be wanting you to do if I look back at it is I'm wanting you to manage my disappointment or my frustration or my hope.
How would I manage it?
By having more sex. If I felt, this is the typical from what I used to do. make a move or initiation or a question about sex, you would say no, and then I would be pouty. So now all of a sudden, you're not just having to manage our sex life, you're having to manage my emotions surrounding it too.
So as the higher desire, you're feeling like I'm supposed to manage everything.
As the lower desire, I don't, it's not a conscious choice. It's just typically we don't react well as higher desire partners. We've talked about this ad nauseum about if you get angry, if you get pouty, if you do manipulative things in how you react. And I'm not saying you can't be disappointed, but you can be disappointed in a healthier way that doesn't put the burden on your spouse to manage that disappointment. Because that's part of the dynamic they have to face.
I guess I'm getting hung up on the manage. What does management look like?
When you would say no, go back 15, 20 years. And when you would not be interested in some sort of a sexual overture I would make, would you feel guilty for saying no?
I would feel the pressure. It's been a while, so I don't know that if I would say guilty. I imagine that there was some of that in there.
Would you feel a little responsible for me being mad or upset or pouty about that and feel guilty about that?
For sure.
Okay. That's what I mean is like, there's a component of, that's going to be the impact of saying no as a lower desire spouse, even as a higher desire spouse on something.
So I have to deal with it. Managing it is a different.
A lot of times higher desires don't handle it well. And if you don't handle it well, who does it fall on? Your spouse. And that's where we make those slip of the lip conversations about, well, yeah, but you didn't want to. That's I'm resourcing that to you.
I'm placing blame on you.
Right. And I bring it up after the fact and it's kind of a dribbled through. And all of those are things that are showing I'm not handling this well. And then the reverse can be true with a lower desire partner where they could be accurate in when they talk to their higher desire spouse of, well, but you're the one that's going to want this more. So you're responsible for initiating it. You're responsible for leading it more. And they're right, quote unquote. It falls more on the higher desire's shoulders, but they're weaponizing it because they're not looking at their own role in what do I want? What's my part in this dynamic? I'm okay just sitting back and letting someone else take charge of that entirely for me too. And so it's just, we can both do it and realize that what's being required of us is oftentimes it's not just in the fact of we're having sex or not. It's also the emotional ecosystem surrounding it that we don't handle and we resource out to my partner.
Which is not really good teamwork here. Right.
It's not going to bring desire.
It's not going to bring desire. You think about and you get a good team and there's synergy and you're trying to work together toward a goal. You both have different goals in this situation, it sounds like. And so it makes the work heavier for both. That's exhausting. I'm just thinking about that time and how exhausting that is within a relationship, especially with the dynamic of all the other things probably going on that have nothing to do with sex, but they all come back and, they all connect.
Absolutely.
They all connect.
And it's not just exhausting for the lower desire spouse.
No, it's exhausting.
It's exhausting for the higher desire, but oftentimes the higher desires would place the burden on their partner, which is the same thing the lower desire is doing too, of like, I just want you to stop having pressure. I just want you to stop pursuing. I just want you to not want that so much. All that. I mean, and that's one of the threads that came up in the conversation on the platform, kind of alluded to some really bad advice that's been out there in the interwebs of if you are the higher desire spouse, you need to read the room better to know if it's okay to initiate or not, which means that the lower desire spouse gets to determine everything, which is far more than they actually have control over.
So you can't even try to initiate if you deem that the room is not ready.
Right. Because that's that whole, well, for the lower desire, well, I have to feel like I'm interested in that before you could approach me. I have to have some sort of conditions perfect before you approach me. And like that doesn't last. That doesn't happen in our world. Right. We're free to choose and speak. And yes, I need to have some tact and some wisdom and understanding my map of you to know there are times when it's absolutely stupidly idiotic to make a move because it's not coming from goodness. Then it's not coming, there's something else there because I'm not actually coming after you in a good moment, even close to where it would cultivate something great for both of us. And so there's an element of realizing we both need to play our parts better, because that's what's required of us if we want to go to a deeper level with each other. If we want to just have sex, that's a different story, because that can happen. That's where it gets into the exchange-based obligation meter. That's one of my clients said.
Well,
that
you use the word "we" with that. If we want to just have sex.
Well, but what came to my mind as I'm talking is I got a client from years and years ago that she referred to him as a meter, that she knew when the meter was about to pop up, like the parking meter. It's about to expire, so she better get herself interested in sex. And it's like, wait a second, do you guys realize what you're describing? That's not something coming from goodness for both of you. That's one of you managing the other. Time for me to go feed the meter. Yeah, that's good dirty talk. That's enticing and inviting. No, I mean, so it's just, but there are couples that will do this because that's all they think it is. It's largely, how do I appease? And then how do I at least get sex, if we look at it from both ends of the spectrum? But if you want to go to deeper levels where there's actually desire, because I think a lot of times as higher desire spouses, you need to ask yourself better questions of, what am I really wanting? Is it sex, or is it I'm wanting to feel wanted? I'm wanting to be loved. I'm wanting to feel okay. I want to know you want me. I mean, there's deeper things in there. And if that's what is really fueling your sex life, then you're not putting yourself in a position to actually invite that, because you're not taking a risk. You're utilizing the dynamic to keep it at, you're going to get what you're getting. And that's where that phrase of every system is designed to get exactly what it gets, because of the way you're culpable in creating what happens. And so if you want something different, you have to change what you do. And so it has to be better at understanding, what am I really after in this? What is good if we had sex? And if it's not that, what do I do now rather than blame you? Or how do I face?
Are we ready to jump into that? Are we ready to jump into the extended content and say, what do we do now? Because I'm ready to have solutions as opposed to just, here's the problem.
Okay. Well, but what I wanted to do first, before we do that, because I like where you're, look, I got you all engaged in this. So what I want to do now is I just want to help make sure we land the thought that a very, very important aspect of our conversation is, yes, marriage does create pressure. It is inherent in the system. It's coming with it, whether you like it or not. It's going to happen, because what you want will challenge what I want. And so I can either get you to give up on what you want, or I need to confront myself in what's being exposed, because marriage also exposes us. Mm-hmm. It reveals where I'm dependent, reactive, uncertain, avoidant, entitled, selfish. I mean, it reveals all of that if I'm paying attention. And so the pressure and the systems, the dynamics within a system are meant to do something, and it's really to expose your own immaturity, not what your spouse is or isn't doing. Okay. That's good. Okay. So I just want to make sure that's very, very clear that this is what happens in a marriage. This is what happens in any relationship, but it gets so much more refined and intense in marriage. And so I don't want anybody to think they're off the hook, like something's going wrong, but to see it as, no, this is what's really happening. And so if I want to utilize that better, that's when we'll move into the extended content. So if you're not a member of the Academy or the extended content, join us, smr.fm/academy, and you can continue our conversation.